Hello, BookTube. Well, it's the last day of November. We're about to launch into a new month tomorrow, and that has caused a whole bunch of booktubers to do what they always do, which is to do a TBR video for the upcoming month, a to be read video, where they look at what they're projecting their reading to be for the upcoming month. This doesn't conflict with the fact that a great many booktubers describe themselves as mood readers. These are more like plans, dreams, and they are so much fun to watch, those videos. They're so interesting to see what's on your mind. The month will have its way with you. The events will have their way with you. I don't know of anybody. I've never watched a booktuber who made a TBR video and held to it even when they didn't want to. Instead, this is a dream of how your interests are trending for the upcoming month. And December TBR is a bit tricky for me, not only because I'm not actually that much of a mood reader, but also because of the reason why, which is that my reading is prescribed of my own free will. It's prescribed to 80% new releases. And that makes it a problem for December because there are very few major mainstream new releases coming out in December. Just a handful. And I've read all of them already. I'll read a lot of them again as I get finished copies in the month. But more and more, especially after the middle of the month, my reading will be given over to rereads or older stuff. I'll still read a large percentage of the indie published stuff that is suggested to me by email, ebook deal of the day type websites. But more and more as the month moves on, I will be reading older stuff. And so my December TBR, I want to do a December TBR of my own, and a large chunk of it is going to center around reading projects that I want to do in the new year if I come back and I'm reading and so on and so on and so on. All the variables. If the variables fall into place next year, then there are some reading projects that I want to do. Some fairly big ones, in addition to all the reading that I do otherwise, in addition to anything else that I read. One of those reading projects has a sad origin. I recently lost a longtime bookish friend, and I have heard through the grapevine that I am getting a lot of books from this friend. I told him for years I don't want any books. Don't stipulate that. Don't tell anybody that. Don't write it down, for God's sake. Don't do anything like that. But I have it on good authority that I may be getting his entire collection of the Harvard University Press's Tati library. Some of you may know the Harvard University Press's Loeb Classical Library, where they do the classics of Greece and Rome in handy little green and red volumes. But they also do normal-sized hardcovers of the Tati Renaissance Library, all with a uniform sky blue cover, but the same Loeb Classical Library design, where the original language is on one side and an English language translation is on the other. And unlike the Loeb Classical Library series, with Tati series, a great many volumes have the only English translation that's ever been done of that work. I'm an enormous fan of the Italian Renaissance, and I have been getting Tati library volumes for 15 years, 10 years. I get them. I read them. I love them. I usually love the scholarship. I will often review them. I think I've reviewed more of these volumes than anybody. But then I don't keep them. Generally speaking, I get rid of them. So on the one hand, I pale at the idea of getting 5 boxes of books that are going to need space on bookshelves. But on the other hand, it's a princely gift if it happens, and it got me thinking about the Italian Renaissance quite a bit. So this reading project for 2025 is a little provisional. It's a little provisional in the form that it will take. If I get all of those Tati library volumes, then I will read them all, or reread them all, and use that as a springboard to devote the whole year to an Italian Renaissance reading project. If I don't get those volumes, which will not break my heart, because I'm trying to decrease the number of print and paper books that I have here. What's the matter? What's the matter, baby? Oh, to get down there? Oh, there you go. Oh, there you go. If I don't get those volumes, then I will just do a deep dive into the Italian Renaissance myself. English language translations, but also originals, all the Itati volumes that I do have, and also overview histories, which I mentioned the other day are an art form on their own. I tend to love them on their own, even though if it's a subject that I know really well, an overview history is not going to actually teach me anything. I still love them. And I was looking around the place. I don't have any physical books here for my TBR, but I have pictures. I was looking around the place at the Renaissance overviews that I have. I have 2 volumes by Vincent Cronin, The Florentine Renaissance and The Flowering of the Renaissance. It's been a long time since I read either one of those. Of course, I have Will and Ariel Durant did a volume on the Renaissance that is well worth reading. I want to reread John Hale's masterpiece, The Renaissance in Europe. That I remember I read it when it came out to a great deal of fanfare, and I thought it was a trifle dry. But it's been a long time since I read it, so I will go at it again. And also, John Addington Symonds did a gigantic multi-volume work on the Italian Renaissance. I have a couple of those volumes, but I can make it my business to get them all and just reread that. I have read the whole volume talk about erudition. This is the Italian Renaissance's decline and fall of the Roman Empire. Just for some reason did not stick. I have no idea why. It's every bit as erudite. It's every bit as beautifully written as Gibbon's work. But that's a little bit provisional. The actual shape that takes in 2025 will depend on whether or not I get that massive bequest. A couple of the other major projects that I want to do in 2025 aren't provisional. And one is a systematic reread. In fact, a few of them are. That's the term that I've always used in my own reading life for revisiting an author and their milieu. Not just dipping and picking and pecking, but a systematic rereading of the entire works and world of an author. A systematic reread. I've done a couple of those this year. You want to come over here? Come on, you can do it. There you go. You're awful indecisive today. She's all worked up because on our afternoon walk, the weekends, I swear, everybody's out and about. They're all talking on the sidewalk or working in their garden or unloading groceries from their cars, and they're all fair game for her. She just walks right up to them, stands up on their legs, and demands their attention. And that we did that in an hour, and I think it was a 90-minute walk. We probably did that 100 times. Just her assaulting people to make them fuss over her. And because she's so cute, everybody did. Anyway, I never know really what reading currents are going to draw me to a systematic reread, but I'm going to do a few in 2025, and one of them has been building for a little while. And it may seem a little odd, but all of my systematic rereads are a little odd in one way or another. This is the science fiction and fantasy author Anne McCaffrey. I'm going to reread, or I guess read. I think they're all rereads. But I'm going to read everything that she wrote in 2025. Not just the Dragon Riders of Pern books, but all of it. The science fiction, all the other series, everything. And since that's a 2025 project, I really can't embark on it now. But I can do some preparatory reading, and I'm going to do some preparatory reading, even though it's the most dorky thing in the world. I'm, of course, going to get a copy of The Dragon Lover's Guide to Pern, which is an overview of the Pern world and the Pern characters and whatnot. With, don't let the professional cover of this thing fool you. There's lots of amateur artwork in here that is just unbelievably dorky. But I don't have a copy of this. I've spent most of the last 40 years having a copy of this, but I don't at the moment. But it's not hard to come by. And the same thing with this next one is a little harder to come by, but at my used bookstore I see everything. So this is the Atlas of Pern, which Pern is the home planet of the Dragon Riders of Pern series. That was her hit. That was overwhelmingly the most popular thing she ever did. And this is an atlas, but also has tons and tons of history and lore worked throughout this book. I don't these two are the preparatory works that I can do for this systematic reread. But the systematic reread will be about a lot more than just Pern. I might start with the Pern books, or I might stop with them, or I might usually what I do with a systematic reread is learn the rough chronological order of books so that I can see how they're influencing their successors. I'm not meaning to do it in a picky or a pedantic way. I just, when I do a big reread like this, I usually tend to go forward in time. So I may do that for Anne McCaffrey, and we'll just see where it leads. I'm going to read everything by her. And then this next reading project has been a long time in the making. 2025 is finally going to be the year when I have my reckoning with Charles Dickens. A dickening. It will finally be the year when I do. Largely because the literary friend that I lost, the one who is maybe going to send me boxes and boxes and boxes of Tati volumes, literally went to his grave mystified that I did not love Dickens as much as he did. Or as he used to put it, when he was here for Wine and Calzones, that I did not love Dickens as much as, quote, everybody does. And I know that's not true, but sometimes it feels that way. If there's one common currency in the literary world before Colleen Hoover, it's probably Charles Dickens. This is not a case where I'm going to say, all the world is wrong and I'm right. I have never enjoyed reading Dickens fiction, never. I've only scarcely enjoyed reading his nonfiction. But in 2025, I'm going to read everything by Dickens. And with a wide open mind. Actually, with that old friend in mind. To see if maybe this is the year, and by more or less silent implication, this will be my last try. It will be my greatest try and my last try to get why so many bookish people I have known in my life swear by this author. So this is definitely something where I'll be doing in chronological order, and I will do that all throughout the year. But preparatory to that, as part of a December TBR, I can read about Dickens. And I have quite a bit here. I like reading about Dickens a lot more than I like reading him. I have an old volume, an old hardcover over there of Charles Dickens as editor that I dipped a toe into when I first got it at the Brattle years ago. But I will read it again, see what it has to tell me about Dickens' work habits. There's George Gissing. George Gissing wrote a critical biography of Charles Dickens. So this is a case where a B-tier Victorian author writes a book about an A-tier Victorian author, the A-tier Victorian author. I've read this a couple of times. I have a little hardcover. It's always a little bit a source of heresy for me, especially with old literary friends of mine, because I think there's more honesty, although I don't require that of a novelist. I think there's more honesty and more talent in New Grub Street than there is in anything that Dickens wrote. Gissing's wrote a lot more duds. There's a lot more uniformity in whatever Dickens wrote. But I'll read this again, and as that'll be a footstool to modern biographies. So I will read a slew of them. I think I have 6 of them, and they'll all be rereads for me, but I will read them all. Maybe I'll find others along the way. Claire Tomlin wrote a biography of Dickens that I did not like. I thought it was hectoring and squinty-eyed. Oddly enough, I think of the major biographies of Dickens, this might be the one by an author who dislikes him the most. You'd think that would be congenial to me, but I didn't like the way it came out on the page. Maybe that's the way I come out on the page when I write about Dickens. Then there's Fred Kaplan, a great biographer. I absolutely love him. I don't remember absolutely loving this book, but that could be Dickens. This is just a handful. I will be reading lots and lots of Dickens, about Dickens in December. Of course, Peter Ackroyd's big book that I absolutely love. And also I have the Cambridge Companion to Charles Dickens. These things aren't there. These things are haphazard. They're not uniformly readable. They're encyclopedias basically. So I don't know. I don't think I've read everything in this thing, but I will read everything in it. And the nice thing about the Cambridge Companion is, and I might even have the Oxford Handbook to Dickens. The nice thing about them is that I can chase down all sorts of other reference works, which would be great. And a lot of these things, a lot of this reading about Dickens will be part of another project for 2025. Not a book project, but definitely a reading project, which is to use libraries more. I belong to 2 libraries here in Boston, and I'm sure that between the 2 of them, they can get me a huge amount of the references that are in the Oxford Handbook or the Cambridge Companion. So I will try to do that. I want to be completely up on Dickens before I get to him, before I get to his fiction, and then I'll read the fiction in chronological order. And then the last major project that I have in mind for 2025, of course, none of us knows if any of this is going to happen, but the last major project that I have in mind for 2025 is the most major project. It is Operation Barbarossa, in which I reread in English every major work of Russian literature. This old friend, I don't mean him to hover over this whole video, but this old friend, I hinted this idea to him, oh God, a year ago, that I felt like I wanted to do this. This was before I was shamed on Russian literature in a live stream. And my old friend rather irritatedly quipped that, well, I guess as a side note, just as on a whim, you'll teach yourself Russian. Because I have a bit of a facility with languages and he doesn't, or didn't. So, but I'm not going to do that. This is still going to be a study in English language translation. And it's big. Operation Barbarossa is a big thing. But it too can inform a December TBR, because I can read about Russian literature a lot. I have a lot of books about Russian literature or Russian writers. So I will be reading Binion's biography of Pushkin, which I've read this already and I loved it. I think it's just great. I'll be reading Henry Troyat did a biography of Tolstoy. I don't have this dumb old trade paperback, but I actually don't have a copy of this at all, but it's easy to find and was for a long time the biography of Tolstoy. The biography of Tolstoy now, for the popular press, is A.N. Wilson, but I don't want to read A.N. Wilson. And there are plenty of other choices. So I'll reread this, definitely. And then we'll just see. There's another Tolstoy biography that came out just a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, that I don't think I ever got to. I don't think I ever read it. I can find that. I'm sure I can find that, especially if I do follow through with using libraries. And really using them until they herniate, which I have had friends, especially a friend at the Boston Public Library, who says, I don't know why you don't do that. You would be, his term was a problem child. That was his way of saying a user who really uses the library, who really uses the research end of the library. Probably I would be a problem child, but he says you would be a problem child when he says that. He says it with a great anticipation. He would like to see what we could do. So maybe a whole bunch of Tolstoy biographies that I don't want smelling up the place here, but maybe a whole bunch of Tolstoy biographies aside from the one that I'm sure I can find, and aside from A.N. Wilson. And then there's, for Operation Barbarossa, I'm going to need to read all of Dostoevsky. And when it comes to Dostoevsky biographies to read ahead of time, one suggests itself. There is one masterpiece. But it's multi-volumes. It's incredibly detailed multi-volumes of a miserable, penny-poor epileptic who never bathed in his adult life. And I don't know that I'm up for multiple volumes of Joseph Frank. I may just get a copy of the 1-volume abridgment that he did. I know that's weak, but I may do that. Unless I want to be top G and the ultimate dude bro, in which case I will read the multi-volume life of Dostoevsky. We shall see. I don't have any of them at all, so we shall see. Then for more modern authors, I'm going to draw the line in the Soviet era for Operation Barbarossa. So I'm going to start more or less with Pushkin and then draw the line at the Soviet era. So I'll be reading as much as I have here and as much as I get my hands on in December in preparation for that, before I read all of that or reread all of it. A lot of it will be new to me. A lot of Russian authors will be new to me. But I will reread this, for instance. This is a weird pulled together thing that I really enjoyed when I first read it. It's edited by Anthony Beaver. It's a writer at war about Vasily Grossman. It's not actually a soup to nuts biography, but it will definitely do, especially since I'm going to be rereading Grossman uh, during 2025 for Operation Barbarossa. I'm going to be rereading this author. That's no small undertaking. So this will definitely work. And then I can finish up with an author that I don't know well enough. I had for a long, long time an old Russian friend, a friend who was lived in Russia, loved her country, rose pretty high in the Politburo, was my host whenever I visited Soviet Russia, and she loved Anna Akhmatova enormously, and so did everyone that she knew. It was incredible. They had this stuff at their fingertips, and I have liked what I've read in translation. I'm told, of course, by Russian readers that nothing survives the translation. I don't believe that, but I'm not going to teach myself Russian. I'm not going to invite the angry shade of my dead friend. So I'm not going to teach myself Russian. So it's going to have to be English language translation. So I will reread and study. I'll bear down on her poetry and all of her contemporaries. But also there's a biography that I saw when it originally came out. I don't think I read it. It's by Elaine Feinstein, and it's Anna of All the Russias. And I want to read this. I'll read any biography that I can find of her. Again, that will be a use for libraries. Maybe December, in addition to all these things being a December TBR, maybe December will be a time for greasing the wheels and getting the patterns in place for that kind of increased library usage. I could easily see that happening. All of this because my normal bailiwick will be loosening up a little. I won't be getting one major new release after another. So there you go. That is not only a December TBR, but plans for the new year. These are videos that I'm seeing start to crop up. People making plans for 2025, reading plans for 2025, and also December TBRs. So that's at least something of what I'll be doing. And of course, I want to know what you're doing. What are your December plans for reading? It's right around the corner. So feel free to tell me in the comments or send me an email or make a video. But I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.